For the artist panel, we have Stanford Carpenter, assistant professor of, now my brain's fried, Visual and Critical Studies at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, John Cassaday, well-known artist from Astonishing X-Men and costume designer on the new Watchmen film, and of course, Alex Ross, who probably doesn't need any introduction, but Alex Ross.
I don't get any credits at all?
Oh, well, Kingdom Come, Marvels, new superpowers, and...
all-around good guy.
All-around good guy.
I guess I wasn't good enough to be called for the Watchmen movie designs, but...
And I'm going to turn it over to Stanford.
Nothing's good enough, is it? It never is.
Yes.
And this will be an awesome conversation.
Yes.
They even called it that.
Pete asked me if I had a watch, so we will put our little timer on here. What we're going to do is we decided, the three of us, to start a conversation, and we're going to continue that conversation here in front of you. And
we decided we would start a conversation?
Well, we started the conversation. We talked about this earlier. The idea was to talk for a little bit about costume designing in three different categories, and then to open it up for question and answer, so that you can ask the questions about the things that you're most interested in. So the three areas that we're going to go over are going to be designing characters with a history, and that will be Alex will be talking about his work on Superman in connection with Kingdom Come, and we've got Astonishing X-Men, which is a piece that John Cassaday is very well known for right now, and also dealing with designing referential characters. And we'll be talking about, Alex will be talking about Project Superpowers, and John will be talking about Planetary. And then we're going to be talking about a character that they've both been involved in, which is Captain America. So we're going to start this off sort of as a Q&A between us, and then we'll be opening it up to everyone else in the audience. Okay. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with a question. And it's the question that we had talked about earlier. Is in coming to a character with a history, and where do you start? What's your sort of design philosophy around designing a character, and especially a character with history?
Oh, since I'm a big comics fan, I'll have some instinct towards that character that will immediately come to mind, and sometimes I'll just have the simple approach of, if it isn't broken, don't try and fix it. With something like Superman, where this is a project I pitched to DC, it was a way of trying to harken back to the earliest version of the character, the one from the 30s, where he had, in my vision, mostly just a very blocky kind of frame, a very square-like head, sort of the Charles Atlas ideal of physical dynamics, as well as some little design aspects to the outfit, like the S hadn't fully formed into the graphic we know today, the kind of emblem we'll have on T-shirts and whatever. And I thought that retooling that S in not so much I hate to use quotes, but the futuristic kind of take, but in a more streamlined fashion, where if you imagine that the S shield is evolving over time, that you would be watching it grow as the years went on. And since the book that I worked on with this version of Superman, Kingdom Come, was set some 20 years from now, where Superman is, say, in his early 60s, because I believe he's around 40, because I can't buy the idea he's in his late 20s, honestly, that he's reached like the end of his cycle, but at the same time, the end of his cycle is reflective of the beginning of his artistic journey. And so I was trying to channel as much of the influence as I could from Joe Shuster's original design of the character, and also the black design for the S was hearkening back to a look of the Fleischer cartoon interpretation that happened back in 1941 that was very successful and some of the best cartoons ever created. And they did a special version of the costume that had this black S. But anyways, as Superman's just a broad example of the way that I would approach retooling a character from either I love it, so I won't change it, I'll just try and paint it, which is my art approach to comics, or I try and reach into the character's history and pull something that maybe hasn't been used in a while and resuscitate that thing, that graphic element, whether it's an overall look or just a detail. Should I say something about this, or do you want to? You wanted to diss this version of the character,
I didn't want to diss it. No, what happened is I was going through and I was like, oh wait, we always tend to forget about the blue version of Superman when he had the lightning costume, because I was trying to put together some of the previous images of Superman.
Might want to check who's in the audience before we start dissing any costume.
Paul Levitt's left already, so don't worry about it. We can say anything we want.
But I mean, I thought what I thought was interesting is looking at what you did in terms of changing the character's costume. But then I was looking back at the other versions, and a lot of the versions have been really subtle changes, like like in this you could see where they darkened the color of the costume, and they had hair a little bit longer, and then they had this much more radical reinterpretation of the costume, which they didn't plan on keeping, but they had around for a while.
Well, I think that they should always be encouraged. People should be encouraged to try something visually dynamic and experimental, especially under the idea that it is just an experiment for a period of time. The most threatening thing is when you tell fans of a long-running character that that's it, this is the new design, get used to it, your version that you like the most is gone.
You know that thing that's been working for 60 years? Suddenly it doesn't work. Okay.
So, I mean, the Blue Superman was just part of a storyline where they were ultimately building up to pay an homage to a very old 1960s storyline about the idea of what if Superman could split into two people, and it was an imaginary story where he becomes two separate Superman. One wears a blue Superman costume, the other a red one. It's the amazing story of Superman Red, Superman Blue, and this was a modern homage to that famous story, taken in a very designy, crazy sense.
Well, the irony is that, I mean, they end up actually using the costume again for a different character. I mean, it's the costume. Yeah. It's not
a
the
good
costume.
design.
Yeah, it's a good design costume, but it wasn't Superman. I mean, I think that was the real issue.
And also understanding with each and every character, there is no right or wrong version. Everybody's got their favorite. If you grew up in a certain time period, you might be adjusted to what was on the television version of that character, the certain actor, or you might have been more in tune with the comics of whatever time period, but everybody's got a way of looking at a character. So as a creative person working with your own version of that character, you're hoping to reach out and either grab people's attention to be on your side, looking at the character in the same way as you, or you might realize that your version is going to put more people off than bring more people to your side, and you risk that.